Well, it's that time of week again. Time to create an aimless, meandering filler video in between the things that have actual topics. But I think we're all fine with that. You guys seem to enjoy these, and for me, they're much easier to make than anything that requires structure or research. And right now, that's easier than ever. One of the reasons I haven't painted as much in this book is because I wanted to keep a very clear theme, and if I mess up a page and make something that feels out of place, it feels like a poison the consistency of the whole thing. Cohesion is key, and I am deathly afraid of losing that. Fortunately, since I spent all of last video slowly but surely facing down that fear, I've gained a lot of confidence in painting in this thing, so let's buckle down and fill out one of the pages. Today I started with a page adjacent to the one I did last time. Because of the build of the journal itself, I always start on the right page. It's the easier of the two, at least for another 50 pages or so, and once I have it done I work backwards. I got started with a portion of a map I did my best to trace from the original. The parent to this page is an exploration of a culture I'm developing for a fantasy setting I'm working on, so I figured it would be good to set a map of where they live in the setting beside them. But more than that, this big map block does a lot to balance out the composition and really feels correct somehow. I've never really bothered with composition before, but the more I paint on this paper, the more I pay attention to it. There are very specific patterns you can arrange things in on a page like this to make them look good. Especially when people see paintings like these in a book like this, they know subconsciously what to expect and judge it based on that. When you look at these, your mind goes to almanacs, alchemy textbooks, medieval bestiaries, hand-drawn science journals, things with very elegant mixtures of art and text. And I know that too, or at least I have this innate sense of what a positive application for this style is and what isn't. It's an extremely hard line to walk, an artistic imitation of scientific art. I guess that's the simplest way to put it, but it's a bit difficult to explain. Fortunately for me, difficult to explain doesn't mean hard to accomplish, as for whatever reason, this type of art comes pretty naturally to me. It's an art form that lives and breathes by the illusion of information and knowledge. Charts, drawings, diagrams that can be guessed, but their meanings are hidden behind undecipherable languages and bizarre symbols and writing systems. The interpretation aspect makes it so appealing to me. And the more I create, the more there is to explore, which I think makes this all very worthwhile. Although, art doesn't need to be anything in particular to be worthwhile. Most of the time it's probably just worth doing for the sake of doing it. In my last video I called myself a professional appreciator of the world around me, and that impacts what I make in so many ways. I think a lot of people go through their life with their eyes closed to the beauty of nature, architecture, history, clothing, art, etc. A lot of artists too, so when they draw or paint or do whatever it is they do, they struggle to find inspiration and try to force creation out of nothing. I don't think anything worth making can come from nothing. The one thing art has to be is expression of some kind. Mine is an expression of appreciation, respect, and reverence for the beautiful things I love and admire. And it doesn't have to be some grand gesture. It just has to be genuine. Or at least that's my 2 cents on it. I did as much as I could bear on this page, but I got stumped on how to fill the last of that empty space, so being the artistically fearless person that I am, I elected to give up on it indefinitely and work on something else. I didn't really go into this part with a unified goal or vision, but I did have the vague idea of doing something regarding mythology and legendary creatures in my setting, which led me inevitably to the herons. These guys are kind of the symbolic heart and soul of this setting, and were one of the very first pieces of this idea I really put together. I've decided on some 30 or 40 species, ranging in height from a low end of about 9 feet to about 35 feet high at the most. They're a widespread clade of animals that have made their habitats in every corner of the archipelago, and as such have been encountered and viewed by different cultures in wildly different ways for thousands of years. To a few of the cultures that live here, they're sacred, godlike beings, but that's a convention of the regions where the herons are small and shy enough as to not be a threat. But herons are predators, and above about 25 feet, the paradigm shifts from divine to demonic. And since we never got into the cultural art style of our people group from the last video, that's exactly what I ended up doing subconsciously on this page. I decided early on that this would be a very low-tech society living in the equatorial jungles near the eastern coast of our archipelago, which is great for me because it gives me an excuse to use all my fun, vibrant colors that just weren't present in the other culture we developed. I ended up pulling from some Aztec influences, especially from the bends and curves of things like Quetzalcoatl, a feathered serpent deity that shows up a lot in their art. But while I took some of the colors and adapted some variation on Aztec line art, I incorporated a good deal more flowing, curling shapes, like in the feathers, horn, and plumage on the head and chest. This works to give the creature a bit of a frantic energy and implied movement, while also conveying a theme of disorder and wildness. I got talking with a friend of mine about this setting the other day, and when we got on the subject of themes, I said one of the absolute foundational pillars of this story is the power and indifference of nature. And since these creatures are the quintessential symbol of this story and its setting, I want to make them embody the themes as much as possible. This of course isn't a perfect example since it's meant to be a biased depiction of a terror created from the eyes of its prey, but the herons are everything this story has to say about nature rolled into a single animal. They're a huge, awe-inspiring taxonomy of some of the most elegant and beautiful birds in nature, but at the same time, cold, dangerous wild animals that wouldn't hesitate to devour anything that's small enough to be picked up and swallowed. They are exactly what they need to be. But there's still a lot of space to fill, so let's get to work on that. I started by doing a quick little hunter-type person with a spear facing off against our heron, giving us the very first depiction of this people group in their own art. But it's probably the last as well, at least for a while. We still need to get a bunch of variation in here to round out the composition, and we can't have too much of the same. This page ended up being a pretty solid vessel for experimentation, if nothing else. I got back to thinking about what kind of mythological monsters or cryptids might be important to this culture, and after throwing some ideas around, I ended up with some sort of centipede, as that's about as tropical jungle as you can get. I have a bit of a nasty habit of using the real-world phenomenon of insular gigantism as a magic wand to make whatever I want massive just because I think it would be cool, but knowing that hasn't stopped me before, and it certainly won't stop me now. So let's say these are 20 feet long on average. I can think of few things more awful and terrifying. But other than just big centipede, I don't really know what kind of legends or histories I want to attach to it yet, so we'll leave it be for now so we can try out some filler. For my shorts, I've been meaning to do one that involves a bit of lore about some carved stone plates, but a flat piece of stone with engravings and indentations is kind of a difficult thing to paint, so I figured I'd test out a method here and get a sense of how it works. For the subject matter, I went back to the herons, because why not? Added a little building with a fire on top, and above that, a handful of symbols for an eventual written language, or at least something close, kind of the in-between of an alphabet and a system of pictographs. I took a bit of inspiration from a Polynesian writing system I found. I can't remember exactly what it's called at the moment, but I'll figure that out and put it in the description. I really like how this ended up turning out, although it definitely looks more like a cave painting than a carving. I've never been a champion of technique, but to get that carved look, it's going to take a bit more finesse. I'll leave it for now though, there's more important things to work on at the moment. Writing especially, a lot of empty space to fill out. The writing was actually one of the things I was most worried about painting in here, since I thought there would be such a high chance of messing it up somehow, and ruining whole pages with tiny bits of gross looking penmanship. But it improves with practice, and I really don't know what I would do without it to fill out the negative spaces. Probably just make another fake writing system, but I digress. But you can only do so much of that until it starts to feel a bit monotonous and samey. This is the part of the process I like to call random auxiliary filigree to fill the empty spaces. It's kind of dangerous water really, if you're thinking of the whole page or pages as a single piece. Too many of these little plaques, too many different shapes or conflicting colors, and what was a cohesive work becomes a disjointed mess, no matter how nice each component looks on its own. I hate to say it, but at this part of the process, it almost stops being fun and begins to be a massive headache. You go from effortless bends and shapes and colors to sitting at your desk staring at the empty spaces on your page, racking your brain to think of the absolute perfect piece of decoration that won't ruin everything else around it. Sometimes it's not too hard, but because of the layout I gave everything on this spread, this one is being pretty difficult. But that's fine, we can work around that. All we have to do is come up with some setting and tone appropriate baubles and trinkets to cram into the negative spaces, which is how I came up with this copper spearhead here. I mean, the guy I drew in this picture has a spear, and since they can do some detailed stone carving, the logic for them to have some sort of metal to work with is pretty solid. But beyond that, I was stumped again for a while. It just seemed like no shape would really fit nicely into the open half of that left page, and whatever I picked would look unbalanced. Fortunately, the spearhead gave me exactly what I needed. The vertical greenish shape seemed to work, so using some plants in similar colors and lengths, everything finally started coming together. And with about all my page space finally taken up, I filled in some of the edges with some writing and called it good. Thank you all so much for watching and spending a few minutes relaxing and painting with me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It really helps a ton. Hope you all had a great weekend, enjoy your Sunday, and until next time, have a lovely evening.